Hello there, and welcome back. It's good to be with you. For our starter today, I have a story called Two Sons and What They Did with Their Marbles. Once upon a time, a long time ago, a mother gave each of her sons $2, which was a lot of money at the time. And she took each of them to a toy store to buy beautiful, shiny marbles that they had been asking for. Well, the older son quickly figured out how many marbles he could get with his $2, and he chose the biggest and best of them all. And he brought them all to the counter in a brown paper bag, and he was very happy. Now, the younger brother, who loved marbles just as much as his brother, realized he needed a bag to carry them around in so he could play marbles with his friends. And after choosing a sturdy little drawstring bag, he could only buy about half as many marbles as his brother did, but he was happy too. Now the older brother thought so much of his small treasure that he would never let anyone else play with those shiny marbles. In fact, he wouldn't even play with them himself. He would only look at them adoringly in the privacy of his own bedroom. And whenever he went any place, he gathered them up in the brown paper bag and clutched them tightly for safety. The younger brother, on the other hand, went to the park every day, and he played marbles with his friends for hours and hours. At first, he lost many of his marbles to his friends, but he soon became really good at the game, and he won back lots of the marbles he lost, filling his little drawstring bag back up. One day, as the younger brother was walking to the park, he found a beautiful marble on the sidewalk. And as he walked a few more feet, he found another, and then another. And he found marbles all along the path on the way to the park. Now, he couldn't fit all the new marbles into his bag, so he handed them out to some kids who didn't have any marbles, and they started to play marbles too. And they had more fun that afternoon than they had ever had before. And when the younger brother returned home for dinner, the older brother was at the kitchen table staring mournfully at his wrinkled brown paper bag, which had a big hole in the bottom. Today, we begin with 3 weeks of stewardship lessons that will culminate in our making our pledges for 2025. And this story is a great way for us to begin our series. It's a great reminder about how God blesses the generous and admonishes those who hoard. As believers, we are not to be left holding the bag, clutching it to ourselves with what God has given us. We are to share it with others. So as you prepare to hear God's word today, ask the Spirit within you to convict your heart of the truth of your stewardship with what He has given you. And not just your financial blessings, but your marvels, your talents, your time, all that God has blessed you with. Open your heart to what God has to say to you today. About 25 years ago, I started working at my home church, which was First United Methodist Church in downtown Beloit, as the outreach director. And I actually found this old picture online from 1976 at Christmas before the church was demolished. But the church was a really large church, and it was big enough that we had to have staff meetings every week to cover the events that were going on. And one week, we were talking about a wedding that was scheduled for the coming Saturday. It was a family who were members of the church, so they knew the lay of the land. Now, the wedding didn't really affect me as an employee because we also had a wedding coordinator, and she worked with the family and handled all the details and needs for the big day. But when I came into Sunday morning worship, there was a buzz in the air. The rest of the staff was all whispering, and people were very upset. Something had happened at the wedding. Well, it seems that the groomsmen had got a little anxious waiting for the wedding to begin. And so they took it upon themselves to go out into a little courtyard area we had to get some air before the wedding. And while they were out there, they drank and they smoked. And so we found empty beer cans, small liquor bottles, cigarette butts, and trash all over the courtyard. Needless to say, our staff meeting was a doozy that week. The overwhelming feeling was of shock and hurt that our church would be used this way. It felt like such a violation of sacred space, even though it was outside in the courtyard. But we assumed that everyone would respect the church grounds as sacred like we did. But that wasn't the case. To many of our unchurched guests, it was just a courtyard. But even then, they left their garbage all over for somebody else to deal with. Now, as a church, we could have clutched our bag of marbles tighter and refused any more weddings. Or we could have had better guidelines and oversight so others could celebrate in their marriages too. And fortunately, we chose the latter. But many churches don't. And they end up coveting their church at the expense of bringing others to Jesus. Now, the basic principle of stewardship is that everything we have belongs to God. And we are entrusted with every single thing that we have in our possession. And what we do with those possessions matters a great deal to God. And it's imperative that we're not just hoarding our gifts and left holding the bag of God's blessings, keeping others from participating in the kingdom of God. So today we begin with a familiar parable from the Gospel of Matthew. Jesus tells us a story about a man who goes away and trusts what he owns to 3 other men. And it isn't marbles that he gives them, but bags of gold. And what will these men do with these bags of gold? How will they handle taking care of someone else's property? Now, the parable comes to us near the end of the Gospel of Matthew, and it is one of several parables that Jesus is telling at the end of Matthew to the disciples. The particular parables that he's telling at this time are about what we as believers do in his absence. He has entrusted this world to us, and he has expectations on what we will do with it. And this parable gives us the example of 3 different stewards and what they do with their gifts. So I'm going to read to you today from Matthew 25, 14 through 28. I'm sorry it's cut off on your video. Again, it will be like a man going on a journey who called his servants and entrusted his wealth to them. To one he gave 5 bags of gold, to another 2 bags, and to another one 1 bag, each according to his ability. Then he went on his journey. The man who had received 5 bags of gold went at once and put his money to work and gained 5 bags more. So also the one with 2 bags of gold gained 2 more. But the man who had received 1 bag went off, dug a hole in the ground, and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those servants returned and settled accounts with them. The man who had received 5 bags of gold brought the other 5. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 5, and see, I have gained 5 more. His master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, so I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man with 2 bags of gold also came. Master, he said, you entrusted me with 2 bags of gold, and see, I have gained 2 more. And his master replied, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful with a few things, so I will put you in charge of many things. Come and share your master's happiness. The man who had received 1 bag of gold came. Master, he said, I knew that you were a hard man, harvesting where you have not sown and gathering where you have not scattered seed. So I was afraid, and I went out and hid your gold in the ground. See, here is what belongs to you. His master replied, you wicked, lazy servant. So you knew that I harvest where I have not sown and gather where I have not scattered seed? Well, then you should have put my money on deposit with the bankers, so that when I returned, I would receive it back with interest. So take the bag of gold from him and give it to the one who has 10 bags. So we see in here right away some very important information given to us in this first paragraph. The man going on the journey is the owner and the proprietor of the bags of gold. The servants entrusted are just the possessors or the managers of the gold. Their job was to manage their boss's gold in his best interests and not their own. But the interesting part that Jesus includes is that they are given the gold according to their ability. The boss knows their servants. He knows their abilities, their gifts, and their skills. And so the greater their abilities, the greater the responsibility that is placed upon them. The responsibility was tied to their ability. And responsibility is the ability to respond. So God knows what he can entrust you with and your ability to be faithful, what he has given you. Now, each of the three men takes their bags and heads off to seemingly get to work. Men 1 and 2 promptly put their money to work for the master, gaining him even more. But the third servant digs a hole in the ground and hid the money. Now, before we find this behavior very outlandish, we have to remember our church history. In the Old Testament, they often buried their treasure in the ground. People were constantly being chased off their land, so burying their valuables was common. It was their way of putting it in a vault, if you will, until they could come back for it someday. So this third servant opts to bury the gold in the traditional sense for those who were people in fear. So a long time passes and the master returns and wants to see what they've done. And the first servant had to give an account, and he was commended for his work. As a reward, he would have increased responsibility, even more for God's kingdom. The second servant also reported that he invested the gold, and he too would met with success. So he was rewarded in sharing in the kingdom work. But alas, that third servant who did nothing does not fare quite so well. And this is where we really want to focus today. This exchange is pretty heated, and Jesus says some strong words that matter. So we want to take a look at why the third servant acted this way, and why the master is so darn angry at him for doing it. Now, whether the servant is unwilling to work or unwilling to risk, we don't really know. But by burying the money, he showed that he valued his own safety above everything else. It's clear that this man was more worried about his life here and now, today, rather than his master's yield on what he gave him. And when confronted with his choice, this servant turns the blame back on the master. He says, "You're a hard man. You make money off the sweat of others." And what he is implying is that the master probably wouldn't share any profit anyways. Or if the servant turned out not to be successful, he's going to get punished anyways. So either way, this man has a negative outlook, seeing the downside of this situation in any way that it comes out. So the servant ignored his responsibility to his master and his obligation to his duty. Now beyond that, the disrespect he shows by blaming the master is doubly hurtful. He's attempting to cover up his own failure by putting the onus back on the boss. And of course, the boss doesn't like this one bit, right? This is deflection, and he knows it. And he replies with a scathing criticism of the servant, calling him lazy and wicked. He's lazy for burying the money in the ground, which was the easiest thing to do. He could have just as easily went to the bank as bury it in the ground. And that way it would have been safe as well, and he could have at least earned interest. The servant is wicked for attempting to put all the blame back on the master, attempting to garner sympathy for a situation rather than taking responsibility. And the master points out that at the very least, this attitude that the servant or that the boss was harsh should have motivated this servant to action. The fear of punishment should have moved him to do something, and the servant knows he's going to get it for not doing well. Now, the result was that the servant had his gold taken from him completely. He was fired. Now, I hope you can see in this parable, this cute story, the master is, of course, Jesus Christ himself. And when he talks about going away, he's speaking about after the crucifixion. And it is in this time that he is away, right now, that we as his disciples have these responsibilities. And Jesus tells us here that God has given each one of us the responsibility according to our ability. So yes, some have more ability than others, but that ability can be enhanced. It can be enriched no matter who you are. And that ability comes as a gift of the Holy Spirit, who then lives inside of you, helping you with that gift. And I can't stress enough that every single person alive has a spiritual gift. What are you skilled at? What comes easy to you? What is a natural outpouring of your personality? Are you musically gifted? Can you make others feel comfortable? Are you a worker? This is just a sampling of the ways that God has given you bags of marbles. And the question becomes, what are you doing with them? The two servants in our story who were commended went right out and got busy. But we don't have to be financial wizards or investment bankers to make a difference. Think about the boys in our marble story. How did they handle their marbles? We have been given gifts and skills according to our abilities, whatever they are. And we are to go out into this world and use them, play with them, get better at them. The boy who hoarded his marbles never had any fun. He never had any joy from his mother's gift. Now that must have been a disappointment for her as well. After all, it was her intention to bless both her sons with a gift that would bring joy. Yet his gift seemed to cause him anxiety and stress. He worried about losing it, damaging it, and having it stolen from him. And so he held so tightly that he lost them anyways. And the second boy did the opposite with his marbles. He used them every day to engage with others, spread joy. And when he stumbled on the gift of even more, he shared that bounty. He made it so others could have some of what he had been blessed with. And it didn't seem to cost him a thing in the end. On the contrary, it seemed to bring him even more marbles, more friends, more joy. And that's the funny thing about the Master's gifts to us. Even though we use them to increase his kingdom, we get blessed. In the parable, the Master tells both of the men who were successful that they would share in their Master's joy. He doesn't say, thanks, have a nice day. He says, come and share in the good times with me. Now that too is a promise from Jesus that we are going to share in the goodness with him. But if we choose to bury our gifts out of fear, selfishness, laziness, or whatever reason, we will lose our gifts and our ability to serve his kingdom. And we will have what we have been given taken from us and given to those who will use it. We simply do not want to be left holding the bag when it comes to our gifts. Those gifts are meant to be shared, invested, multiplied, and used. And if we hold on to them, we can't do that. It's like burying them. And anyone who has done even the tiniest bit of ministry can testify to the blessings you receive when you use your gifts. The more you give away of yourself and your gifts to others, the more you are blessed. The more you share in God's kingdom. We simply find more marbles along the path of life as we give ours away in service. And sometimes we even find better marbles than we had to begin with. Don't miss the blessing that the Master has for you as his servant. Be a good steward of what he has given you. Use it, multiply it, and watch it change the world around you. Your responsibility is only limited by your ability. Let's pray. Gracious God, we thank you for including us in the kingdom. Lord, you have given us so many gifts, and you say, use these gifts to bring more people to my kingdom. Lord, our world seems to be having less and less knowledge of you and your greatness, and that falls on us. We're hoarding our marbles. So help us, Lord, to share our gifts, to talk about you, to live like you, so much so that the world sees you in us, and help us to multiply your kingdom in this world and prepare us for the joy of the next. We thank you and we love you and we give all praise to you in Jesus' name. Amen. As always, I thank you for taking the time to tune in when you miss an opportunity to come to worship. And again, as always, we look forward to seeing you if we can. And as your family, we are here for you. If you need anything at all, give us a call. Take care, and we'll see you soon.